Hey, this is Josh, and in this video we're going to be covering a very foundational topic. What is currency? Now this is a very high-level subject, and it's a bit weird. Not any economist or any individual really understands what currency or money really is. There's no set foundation, but I'm going to do the best I can to explain it to you today, just to give you a better idea of where cryptocurrencies are coming from and how they can apply, and the benefits versus traditional currency. So we're going to cover first is just what is currency. So the best way to explain currency is to look at the way we did things in the old days, just the exchanging of goods and services. So back in the day, let's have an example. Let's say there's a farmer, and a farmer grows some food, they have some vegetables, and they want to purchase a donkey or a mule to help them do more things on their farm, more horsepower, essentially. So you have a farmer and you have a rancher. So this rancher has donkeys, the farmer has vegetables and food, and the farmer wants to purchase this donkey, and they're going to purchase it by giving food to the rancher. The only issue is the rancher doesn't need any food. He has plenty, and therefore will not exchange his donkey for that food. However, the rancher does need some horseshoes. So the farmer gets the idea to go to a blacksmith, for example, and he asks the blacksmith if he'll take food in exchange for horseshoes. And he agrees, so he exchanges his food for horseshoes and then takes those horseshoes over to the rancher. And that was just the exchanging of goods and services. Now it's kind of complicated because there were three parties involved, but imagine an economy with billions of people like there is today in the real world, and finding efficient transactions when all you have is the exchange of actual things of actual value, like horseshoes, like donkeys, like food, things that will actually provide a service or a good. It gets very, very complicated. So what we did is we created a medium of value exchange, this idea of exchanging things, understanding that they have a certain kind of value. So one of the best examples of this was gold. So the farmer, the rancher, and the blacksmith collectively agree that this is too time consuming, and they assign a certain amount of value to the gold. And the farmer can tell the rancher that he's going to give him one block of gold for the donkey, because it's worth so much food. And the rancher doesn't want to do that, but then he explains that the blacksmith will also take that gold for horseshoes. And now there's a collective understanding of trust and value in that gold, so they can all exchange freely using this medium of value exchange, which was gold in this case. Now, one of the things that gives us value is the fact that all three parties collectively agree that it has value and therefore can exchange it. They have a certain level of trust. And that's one thing you'll find about in currencies, is that the value of any given currency is all based on trust. It's just a medium of exchange. Like it could literally be water or sand. But there's a certain level of trust associated with that currency that allows them to exchange freely and feel good about it. So the intrinsic value of gold is really nothing. So here, there's a quote from Investopedia.com. The actual value of an asset based on an underlying perception of its true value in terms of both tangible and intangible factors. So what I'm saying here is that gold doesn't have a real value, but it does have intrinsic value because so many people believe and trust that it will be accepted elsewhere in exchange for something of real value, because that other party also will believe the same thing. So when an economy collectively agrees you can exchange a certain medium to exchange value, that's what gives it the value, just that understanding and that trust. Again, gold doesn't have much value at all, really. It's just a rock. It's worth about what you can, really nothing. You can say that you make jewelry out of gold, for example, but the jewelry only seems valuable because it's made of gold itself. The gold doesn't have actual value. It's just that collective understanding that people will also take it for a good or service, which goods and services have actual value. Now there are a couple issues with gold. I want to point out two of them. One is that is the divisibility of it. It's very hard to divide. Now, obviously, you can make 1 gram, 1 ounce. You can turn a pound into many grams, but it takes a lot of work. You see, we have a blacksmith here, and he has to melt it down and then turn it into ingots, purify it. The divisibility isn't that easy. There's also the portability problem. If you wanted to do a transaction with someone on the other side of the world, especially a couple hundred years ago, then you have to, get your gold and put it on a ship and sail over there. Versus things like PayPal and Stripe now allow us to do transactions internationally very quickly. But the portability of gold is a pretty big problem. So then came fiat currency. So this is a quote from the federalreserve.org, and it's about the USD. So real quick, fiat currency is just a currency that is backed by government. And here the Federal Reserve said, the banknote emerged as a medium of exchange. It had no intrinsic value. It was rather a promise to pay on demand a certain quantity of gold or other valued commodity. The banknote's value rested on trust in the willingness and ability of the banknote issuer to meet that promise. So again, this is literally all about trust and promise, and that's how it gets its value. So when the fiat currency, the USD, first came out, every dollar bill was backed by a certain amount of gold. And in today's economy, 1 ounce of gold is worth, quote unquote, around $1,300 in USD. Or you could say that 1 USD is worth around 1/1300th of an ounce of gold, or vice versa. So that's how the USD first came out, was it was backed by a certain level of gold, because internationally gold was used as a medium of exchange and value. Now, fiat currency is a medium of exchange, is one thing. This is literally the definition of currency here. It's a unit of account. So going back to the exchange real quick, you can obviously exchange value with it. I can pay for a good or a service, and so can you. Now, as a unit of account, you're able to assign a number to it. So you have $1, you have $5, you have $10, you have 20, you have 100 in USD, and all other currencies. It's also portable, so it doesn't really solve the shipping problem we talked about earlier unless you have it in electronic form, like in PayPal, for example. But it is much more portable than gold. It's much lighter than gold is, for example. You can put a couple $100 in your pocket and go to the store and buy something, versus taking gold, which, especially in a very large transaction, can be very, very heavy. There's also the durable part of currency. So currency needs to be durable. So if it goes to the washing machine, it needs to be fine. So it gives it a level of trust that not a lot of the USD, for example, or any other fiat currency is just going to go away. It has to withstand the test of time, so that the supply doesn't decrease too much. It has to be divisible as well. So with USD, for example, it's only divisible down to 1 cent. It's very divisible, but it's not perfectly divisible. It doesn't go down to like hundreds of cents or anything. But it is divisible to the point of 1 cent to $100 in USD. It's also fungible. So fungible just means that a dollar in my pocket is worth the same as a dollar in your pocket. So at any given time, every single dollar bill is worth the same. $1 bill will buy me the same thing at one store that it will the other, and vice versa. The last thing is that fiat currency is declared legal tender by the government, and that's what makes this fiat currency versus just any other made-up currency, is that it's declared legal by the government. As an example, we have the USD here, and it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, which essentially means that if you owe money to a creditor, they have to accept US dollars to pay off your debt. Now, it does not necessarily mean that any private institution or company has to take US dollars. For example, there could be a company today that takes Bitcoin and not US dollars. It's often something that people think that any company has to take US dollars, but that's just not the case. And I'll provide some resources down below, some links where you can see this for yourself. So what gives fiat its perceived value now that it's not backed by gold anymore? And again, I've said it several times, it's trust. All currencies are backed by a certain level of trust, and that's what gives them value. As an example, gold is still pretty trusted, and that's why it has such a high value. And so is the USD, because it's backed by the government. It being a fiat currency is what gives it a good level of trust. So the trust is what gives it value. Now here the Federal Reserve said to accept money in exchange for goods and services requires a trust that the money will be accepted by another purveyor of goods and services as well. So anyone will take a transaction with USD because they believe they can reuse that. And again, it's literally just trust, nothing else. That's what gives it its value. This goes into purchasing power. So purchasing power, because fiat is trusted, fiat currency has purchasing power, and that's just the quantity of goods or services that the currency can be exchanged for. For example, a dollar bill will get you a hamburger at any fast food restaurant. But at one time, when the US dollar, this fiat currency, had more purchasing power, 1 USD might have gotten you 10 hamburgers. And this brings up some problems with fiat currency. You can see that purchasing power can change over time. And that gets us into our next slide. Now there's two key problems with fiat currency and most currencies in general. And those two problems are centralization and inflation. And I'll go into those topics more in another lesson. Last thing I have for you are these resources here. Now that we've covered a brief history of currency in general, this is a resource. It's the Federal Reserve. They're actually admitting that there is no intrinsic value in the US dollar. And right here is a private company does not have to accept fiat currency. Again, I'll link these down below. And I hope you understand the gist of this presentation here in this lesson. It's just that any currency is very ambiguous. There's no real set value in any currency, even if it's backed by gold, because gold also doesn't have any real value. Everything in the currency world is predicated on trust, and that's what gives it value. And that's the big takeaway from this lesson.